The whole football stadium is packed, sold out. Woo! It's coming your way.
Hey guys, we're back at High Spots Wrestling Network with an old friend, race car driver, NASCAR driver, Hermie Sadler. I know that he probably talks a lot, does a lot of interviews that have to do with racing on a weekly basis probably. But today we're going to kind of focus on wrestling because a lot of people know about you and your connections to TNA and Jeff Jarrett and stuff. But I don't think everybody knows how far back you went, both as a wrestling fan and as a performer, as a promoter. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff we could talk about.
Yeah, my brother and I both, like a lot of other people that grew up, we grew up in Southern Virginia. We grew up wrestling fans, the old Mid-Atlantic Crockett days, and my dad carried us to a lot of shows as kids, you know, the going to the high school gyms, Virginia, North Carolina. First wrestler I can remember being a huge fan of was Wahoo McDaniel. And he was... You know, I liked the look and I liked what he stood for. And then what an honor for me later in life when I had a car dealership in South Hill, I was able to connect with him, and he came up back in 1992 and did an appearance for me at the dealership, and then he and I went fishing. Oh, wow. So, you know, it was before he, you know, got sick, and so that was, you know, but I just remember, you know, Wahoo, watching him walk in with the, you know, cap and the feathers and all that, and I was hooked. I've been a lifelong fan, and now today have a lot of friends in the industry as well. When
you were taken to wrestling by your dad, your brother, what buildings were you going to living in?
Richmond Coliseum was where the bigger shows were. We used to go down to Raleigh into the TV studio where they used to record the weekend shows.
You did go to the...
Oh yeah, they only had, it looked on TV like it was so big, but when you get there, there's like 2 rows of chairs in the TV studio. I went there many times, and then. You know, Greensville County High School gyms, Parkview in South Hill, when they were making, you know, the loops around those territories, we went a lot, and that was kind of a bond, you know, back in the day, but for me and my dad and my brother, and you know, I always remember the older ladies that were there that were, you know, really into the wrestling at the time, and but I've enjoyed it, a lot of fun. I've always appreciated and respected the people in the business and how they made a living doing something like that, and so yeah, we've been following a long time.
You know, a lot of people, especially people that are not from the South, they associate us like with NASCAR and wrestling, right. and you know, you kind of were in the middle of both there. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of similarities. You know, I raced full time for about 20 years, and now I work for Fox Sports as an analyst for television, and you know, a lot of the same things that are true in professional wrestling are true in racing. I mean, the fans in your fan base and how you connect with your fans, whether you're a driver in NASCAR or whether you're a competitor in wrestling, really dictate or go a long ways towards dictating how successful you are and how much in demand you are as a performer. So you have to have that complete package. You have to, if you're a race car driver, you need to be able to get up on the wheel at the right time and get the job done, but you also need to know how to connect with fans. And I mean connect from the 60, 65-year-old fan all the way down to the 5, 6-year-old fan. You need to have that diversity and know how to connect. And the wrestlers / entertainers that have done that and have kind of crossed over and made that connection, you know, that's a tremendous benefit to them as they move through their career.
And you know, wrestlers and drivers in this area, they are our celebrities around here. Yeah. So I know that you being a driver, you probably interacted a lot with the wrestlers before you got involved in wrestling. Yeah,
I look at it, you know, now and on both sides to have grown up a fan of wrestling and to now have the people in the industry, top level people that, you know, more importantly than that, I consider to be friends, you know, family friends and things like that. Same thing on the racing side. I grew up a fan of Darrell Waltrip, you know, back in the day. Now I work with Darrell at Fox, you know, so to be able to work with him on a weekly basis, somebody I grew up idolizing and, you know, pulling for and all that, same thing. And but another parallel too is I have so many great friends, you know, that I've made through the years, and been through a lot of ups and downs and things with people on the racetrack and friends in the wrestling industry that I've become really close to. And even though I hadn't quote unquote been involved in running shows per se in about 10 years, I still have a lot of connections, a lot of friends, and do things away from the track and away from wrestling with a lot of these people.
You mentioned an appearance by Wahoo McDaniel. Was that the first time that I guess maybe you got involved in the wrestling business side of it?
Yes. Anything I ever did, that's the first thing I did that, that for business purposes, you might say. There was I'm not sure if you remember this guy's name, but I think he's passed away, but I remember the name. Guy's name, Chaz Rocco. Yep. Was an independent wrestler. He was up promoting independent shows in my area around South Hill, Chase City area, and he came by looking for sponsorships, kind of like what I did with my shows. I go to the town and look for sponsorships. Chaz came and visited me, and I just took a liking to him. And but he was promoting a show, and Wahoo was going to be on the show, and I made a deal with him. I said, okay, I'll sponsor your show. It was at the fairgrounds in Chase City. That's where the show was, that particular one. I said, I'll sponsor your show through my dealership in South Hill if you'll get Wahoo to come, because I had just bought that dealership in '92 and was trying to do some grand opening type things and draw some people in. So we made a deal. Wahoo came to sign autographs. We hit it off and started talking, and the next weekend we went to Bugs Island Lake, Wahoo and I, and fished on his boat. So that's something that I'll never forget.
Did you ever golf with Wahoo? Did you ever get to golf?
Never golf with him. Never golf with him.
Fishing and golfing.
He was adamant. He was passionate about it, and really he struck me to be really, wasn't real talkative, overly talkative, but you could tell what a good person he was and how well he spoke about other people in the industry and his friends, and just hearing the stories. Oh, I'm sure. That was worth everything to me, because I was going back now, I was, say, 23, 24 years old, and I was going back and hearing stories about this guy who was my hero when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, and hearing how things were back in those days. True. And how different it was to how I perceived it as a child at that time was really cool for me.
Oh, I bet. So you were in your young 20s when you met Wahoo, when you brought him in for that appearance. What was your next foray into the business side of wrestling?
Well, I grew up in Emporia, Virginia. So
which we have to stop and say, the accent that you have is very distinctive of South Hill and Emporia. And I'm sure you've explained this a million times, but it's like our southern version of Boston.
Yeah.
So
we have our own little dialect of that. Either people know I'm from Emporia or Southside Virginia, or they assume I'm from Louisiana. Yeah. That's what they say. But I grew up, and so at a very early age, I met the Hebners, Dave and Earl Hebner. And so, we were constantly going to shows, and, WWE, WWF at the time, whatever, WCW, we went to, just through the Hebners, created a lot of contacts and knew a lot of people. And of course, me and my brother both racing full time. A lot of people in the wrestling industry that were race fans, and so they would come to the races, and we just started, going to shows, and, just big fans. And one of the friendships that I forged early on, in that, mid to late 90s was, Jeff Jarrett. And Jeff and I became friends, and, we were very similar in age. And at the time, when he just got married and, to Jill, and we both had 3 daughters very close to the similar age as well. So we started pretty early on, spending time together as families away from the track or away from wrestling. And that's back when Jeff was in, WWF, way back when. So became close with him as well as some others. But some people you just become acquaintances of, and Jeff and Jill at the time and their kids, because our kids were such close in age, we had a lot in common. Right. And so, I started spending more time with him and doing things with him. And every time I'd go to a show, I'd meet some people new. And I remember probably in the late 90s, 97, 98, something like that, I had a company at the time that did race car simulators. You could go to an appearance or to a Walmart or to a building or whatever, and you could get in this, one of the early, they're everywhere now, and technology has changed a lot, but we had one of the first kind of hydraulic racing simulators. And I remember, don't even remember why I was out there, but I remember being out in Vegas, and WWE was in Vegas at the time. And through Dave and Earl, we took this simulator down backstage or down below the building at the Thomas and Mack Center in Vegas. And, you know, everybody back there was riding that simulator all night, you know, and so that was, I remember that being a lot of fun. And, you know, everybody, you know, as you saw later, you know, later in life, I got the opportunity to do a few little pay-per-view matches and stuff. So I'm a race car driver, automobile salesman, and you know, I want to wrestle. So I did that. And a lot of those wrestlers, you know, wanted to experience what it was like, you know, to drive a race car. So I remember that, you know, being another time that we kind of crossed over, you know, racing and wrestling. But my connections to the industry outside of my dad and my brother going to shows was through the Hebners.
And you were there, I guess. I remember the Hebners. They at some point got fired from WWF with the T-shirts and stuff.
Right.
But you always kept a good relationship with them because
still do.
Because they worked for you when you did your
yeah. When I started UWF, you know, there's two sides to every story as far as what happened, you know, with them. I judge people on how they treat me, you know, and I still to this day consider Dave and Earl Hebner to be great friends. And so when I did the UWF, early on when I first got started, Dave was somebody I really confided in, knew everybody, well respected and loved in the industry. And then of course, you know, Earl and Brian, you know, worked a lot of the shows for me, and you know, refed and kind of ran the backstage, you know, part of the wrestling side of it, and spent a lot of time with them. They would always come to my house New Year's Eve weekend, you know, back in the day, and really considered them good friends. And then, of course, Dave, you know, not too long after that, had some health problems and, you know, kind of stepped away. But as long as I ran shows, you know, Earl and Brian were always a big part of them. And not only were they great help at the show, they were very entertaining riding up down the highway with. So we shared some great stories.
Very entertaining.
Yeah,
it certainly is. So is his son. So what other things before? Because I met you through the UWF connections and stuff. But I know you had a lot of other stuff going on. You did the TNA pay-per-views and stuff. Mm-hmm. But let's take me even back, other stuff that you did in the wrestling business before you got to even TNA.
Yeah. Well, back in about 1997, I drove a car at Bristol Motor Speedway that WWE sponsored. It was a SummerSlam car. So WWE sponsored my car in that race, and the APA, Ron Simmons and JBL came to Bristol and spent the weekend. Whew, the stories I could tell you about that off the track, but had a great time. And then, you know, I mentioned the car business. I accumulated a couple car dealerships when I signed my first NASCAR contracts in 1992, 1993. I had a couple car dealerships. So as time went on and I got to know more people, and I mentioned Dave Hebner, I wanted to find somebody in the industry to do my commercials for me. I needed somebody, a face to do commercials. So through Dave, back in that time, around 98, 99, right in there, I went to him and we made a deal with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, who was just starting to establish himself as a big-time main event star in WWE. Made a deal with him, so I gave him a Cadillac to drive, and in exchange for that, he did all my TV commercials.
Oh, wow.
And I remember we used to meet at Terry Labonte Chevrolet in Greensboro. That's where we would shoot all of the commercials. So we called it when he would come in for a show in Greensboro, and we'd catch him, you know, the morning before he went to the building, and he'd come in and we'd shoot, you know, 4 or 5, you know, commercials that day. And I mean, they were mostly around humor. You know, they were funny about, you know, him using his demeanor and personality at the time to encourage people to buy cars.
I'm here with The Rock. And Rock, it appears as if the past few weeks for you here in the WWF have been pretty...
Finally, The Rock has come back to Sadler Auto Center. That's right, jabronis. On October 1st, the People's Champ is coming to the People's Choice Sadler Auto Center of Emporia. So call or stop by today for details if you smell what The Rock is cooking. Hey folks, if you're like The Rock, then you're sick and tired of hearing a bunch of garbage from those jabroni car dealers. So listen up. Now everyone knows that The Rock is the great one, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, and above all else, the people's champion. Well, The Rock is here today to appoint Sadler Auto Center as the people's dealership. Now Sadler Auto Center has friendly one-stop shopping for all your automobile needs. So go to where The Rock gets his wheels from, Sadler Auto Center, if you smell what The Rock is cooking.
Hi, I'm Howard Finkel, backstage with The Rock. And Rock, today, a little different subject, cars.
That's right, Fink. And don't you think that The Rock is qualified to talk about cars?
Well,
that doesn't matter what you think, jabroni. What matters is that The Rock has been all over the world. Some places once, some places twice. And after visiting every big car dealership, after reading every misleading ad, after hearing all those lines from all these salespeople jabronis who think that they could talk just like The Rock, well, The Rock says that Sadler Auto Center is the best dealership in America. Sadler Auto Center is the people's dealership, and that Sadler Auto Center's sales and service is backed up by the most recognizable symbol of greatness on God's green earth, the Brahma Bull. So The Rock says this: if you want a great deal, go to where The Rock gets all his wheels from, Sadler Auto Center. If you smell what The Rock is cooking.
Don't miss The Rock at Sadler Auto Center of Emporia, Sunday, October 1st. Call for more details.
I think the new commercial should focus on our GM lines.
Well, Hermie, I drive a Ford, so we can't leave them out.
It doesn't matter what you drive. Tell them about The Rock's favorite, Chrysler and Jeep.
That's a great idea. We've got all the lines. Let's advertise them together.
Yeah, and let's also remind everybody of our huge selection of pre-owned cars and trucks.
And be sure to tell them that The Rock says our prices are rock bottom and lay the smack down on all the competition.
Whoa, Rock. He's not the competition.
Well, these people are gonna smell what we're cooking.
And this is my kind of ride.
This is The Rock's kind of ride.
Well, this is my kind of ride.
But Elliot, we don't sell race cars.
Well, why not? We sell everything else.
That's right, Rock. We offer all domestic types plus Honda, as well as a huge selection of programmed and pre-owned vehicles.
The Rock says head on over to the people's dealership, Sadler Auto Center, if you smell what The Rock is cooking.
So that went on for several years, and I about every 6-8 months I'd drive to Davie, Florida, and drop a car off and pick one up and bring it back home.
So you just give him a new car every 6 or 8 months?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and he did all the commercials, and he was really just starting to take off at the time. And I remember he did a.
Why did you pick him?
Well, it was just kind of a mutual thing. I mean, Dave really. I didn't think he at the time would be a possibility. I just felt like I told Dave I'd like to find somebody, and I just kind of thought he had already passed that point.
Right.
But he ended up being perfect, and he was still getting on his feet. And he just started to make a little bit of money, but he wasn't. He'd overcome a lot at that point, and so I drove down to Davie and stayed at his house several times. And funny story, one of the times a buddy of mine named Greg Thrift rode with me down to do a car swap one time, and carried him a white diamond pearl Cadillac, picked up one, and the one that we picked up, he had tinted the windows and put like a gold package on it, kind of tricked it up a little bit. So I'm driving this car back up 95 around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, real close to Daytona. So I get pulled over, so here's me driving this white diamond pearl Cadillac with the gold package on it with a dealer tag, with one screw in it. And so the guy pulls me over. So first mistake I made was I opened my door right beside 95, and I had my flip-flops on, but I didn't have them on my feet. I set my flip-flops on the ground, and I was going to step into my shoes.
Right.
He didn't like that. He wanted me to stay in the car. So we started, having a conversation about how fast I was going, and then we had to have a conversation about the windows being tinted. So finally he looks at my my license and stuff, and he says, Sadler, are you involved at all with the racing Sadlers that race here at Daytona? And I'm thinking, good.
You're in, right?
I said, yes, I am. Me and my brother both, and I think I'm clear. And he says, I hate NASCAR. I hate their fans. They're belligerent. They don't listen. Da 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 da. So this guy doesn't like traffic detail in Daytona. So I got several tickets, 3 or 4, coming home that night. And luckily, I had some friends in Daytona that I was able to call to get them discarded at the time. But so I'm driving his car on, 4 o'clock in the morning, speeding, tinted windows, the whole 9 yards. It wasn't wasn't a pretty scene.
I'm
But,
just thinking, like, why are you doing these pickups?
yeah. Well, we always, it was fun to go down and hang out with him. You know, I mean, you know, his wife Danny, and, you know, sometimes my wife would go, and, you know, we'd stay a couple of days and, you know, go out, you know, and whatever. And so it wasn't just a go drop off and pick up. You know, we would go spend a couple of days, you know, most of the time and do that. So, and Greg Thrift, the guy that went with me on a couple of these trips to take the cars, he played the salesman. You know, so Rock would walk in wanting to buy a car, and I had my guy Greg Thrift with the nerd glasses and, you know, trying to sell him a car with all his ink pens here, and he's trying to sell him a car, and, you know, Rock's doing his thing on him, so it was quite entertaining.
Hello, Mr. Rock. Can I help you?
Well, the Rock says
it doesn't matter if I can help you. You see, I know what you're looking for. A great car at a great price for the great one, right? Well, we're no jabronis around here. We're not checking you into the SmackDown Hotel. How about this baby right here?
Well, the Rock says
I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, sure, I can do it. I can knock a couple of bucks off for you. I smell what you're cooking. Hey, where are you going?
The Rock's going to Sadler Auto Center, jabroni.
Was it something I said?
Yeah, you're not in the car business right now. Like you've sold all
No,
your
about
dealerships,
8 years ago, I ended up having dealerships in South Hill, Emporia, and Franklin, and had an opportunity to sell them all at one time, and happily did so.
You had a good run with them, though. Right?
Yeah. Oh, I love the car business. Great business. Great way to interact with people and help people. But my family was in it for a long time, and I was in it personally from 1992 was the first one that I bought, and I sold out about in 2008, 2009, right in there. So
it's an expensive business to run, though.
it is. Well, it's a lot of investment for a business that's difficulty with cash flow at times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard to, you know, when you're buying cars and selling cars and you're waiting for the bank to process, you know, contracts, and, you know, you go days at a time without, you know, large sums of money. You're
selling on relatively thin margins compared to most businesses.
Yeah, you have to be there every day, all the time. But I enjoyed it, did well with it, and, you know, if I didn't have so much other things, or my life hadn't taken me in some other different directions, I certainly would still enjoy, you know, being in the car business. But it was an opportunity for me to put those businesses and the people that I cared about so much that worked for me all those years, put them in a situation with another man and family that were big into the car business and growing at the time, and I knew he would take care of them. And most of those people that worked for me back in those days still work for that company.
Oh, wow. That's great. So did the thing with the Rock just kind of run its course with a couple commercials? Why did?
Yeah, we did it in a couple years.
Yeah.
I mean, we did it, and, you know, we used all we could, and it wasn't anything that was going to be a permanent thing anyway. But we used it probably 18 months to 2 years.
And did you kind of like keep in touch with him after that?
Yeah, we kept in touch, and we'd go visit at shows and whatever. And he and Danny came to a couple races. You know, he lived not 30 minutes from the racetrack down at Homestead Miami Speedway, a little town called Davie that he was living in at the time. So, yeah, we kept in touch for a while and got to know each other pretty well.
Did you ever do any other types of business ventures with him?
Well, we tried. They came to the racetrack and watched me race at Homestead in one of the November races. That led to us having some conversations. I was kind of in, you know, in a transition between who I was driving for and what I was doing next year. So shortly after the race at Homestead, he and I started having some conversations about, you know, him wanting to get involved potentially in NASCAR and
like as an owner,
have an ownership interest, you know, in a team. And we in a short period of time, we made a lot of things happen. We decided that, you know, we were going to do it, you know, jointly as partners, and you know, it can take you back to kind of give you the timeline. This is November. We're having these conversations, and Daytona's in February, so a lot of things, you know, have to happen. But we did a lot of things in a short period of time, and we're on our way to going to Daytona, and the deal fell apart. So it never happened, but we and that kind of obviously put a strain on our relationship and our friendship because of how things went down. So that was disappointing.
Well, I mean, you know, it's your call how much you want to talk about it. Why did it fall apart?
Well, I'm still waiting for that answer. You know, that was 2001, 16 years ago. But basically, we got together. We did agreements, contracts. I did most of the business dealing side of things with his wife, Danny, at the time. And on my end, right here in Charlotte, you know, I signed a contract on a multi-million-dollar building for our team to be in. Bought about 9 or 10 race cars, hired a bunch of people. I mean, we were.
So this is way more than just talking about it.
All in. I mean, we had gone. I'd actually gone to the WWE offices and had meetings with some of the people that were involved in their sponsorship acquisition department. You know, because we were having discussions about who we could, you know, go after as far as a sponsor, knowing that Dwayne was involved, and you know, people that they were okay with, people they wanted us not to pursue because of relationships prior with WWE.
Was this, just to put a time frame, was this before or after they had sponsored your car?
After.
Oh, was that, okay.
Yeah, well after. That was like 97. This was like 2001.
So they had kind of already done business with you with the racing business?
Oh, yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, they, you know, I mean, I know, you know, when I would go backstage to shows, I mean, Vince, we would speak and shake hands, and Shane, Stephanie, I mean, and the hundreds of people that, you know, and it was all good. I mean, we started off, I mean, we had designed T-shirts, merchandise, memorabilia, and all these things, and we had gone out and started, you know, to make things happen, and then it came to an abrupt halt.
And you have no idea why? I mean, you must have a...
Well, I don't. I mean, the basically one day I got a call from a guy named Jerry McDevitt, who is an attorney,
WWE legal,
WWE legal, and he basically said, "Hey, we're just getting wind of this partnership with you and Dwayne Johnson. Will you send me all of your paperwork that you have?" And I said, "Sure." So I made copies of the hundreds and hundreds of pieces of paper that I had that we had already done, and contract on the building, bought, you know, all the things that I had done, given the arrangement that we had made. I sent it all up there, and I never heard back directly from them, other than I got a letter sent to me stating that that deal was not going to take place. They were putting an end to it, and for me not to try and communicate with Dwayne Johnson.
How long after you sent those papers did you get a response from them?
3 days.
So it was relatively quick.
Yeah, it was on there, but you know, I understand intellectual property, and I understand that's how they operate, and that's how they make their money and all that. But I had no way of knowing at that time how much. It wasn't up to me to make sure Dwayne had gone and had these conversations with him. I figured if he's designing T-shirts and stuff with me, and I'm sitting in a WWE office in Stamford, Connecticut, talking to their sponsor people about who do you want us to talk to, who's off limits, how can we make all this work, and how does it benefit y'all, and have all these conversations. And you know, it was obvious to me after it was squashed like that through that whole time Vince didn't know about it, or didn't know enough about it, or whatever. And I think he was very mad at, you know, Rock at the time for doing that. And if he didn't know about it, I understand, but it wasn't my responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that he was covering things on his end. I was in Charlotte doing things on my end.
Right.
And it was just unfortunate that instead of being able to go sit down and have a conversation about the whole thing, that WWE at the time chose to, you know, we're not doing this. It's over. Do not call Dwayne anymore, and whatever problems you got, you handle it yourself.
Especially considering you had some signed agreements, so it complicates it a little more than just saying, "Hey, stay away."
I mean, there's no question what our intentions were and what we were doing.
Right.
I had signed papers. They had signed papers. You know, but I know how those things work. You know, I know how big companies like that work.
I don't know. Tell me.
Well, when they tell you do what you got to do, I wasn't going. I spent roughly about $750,000 to that point, with race cars, parts, pieces, and those kind of things. And so they say, okay, we're done. Sorry, And I, at the time, I just had my second child who was diagnosed with autism, and I had a lot of things going on myself. So that's it. It really didn't. I mean, I was mad at the time. I didn't. It was up to WWE. If they didn't want to do it, fine. Mm-hmm. But just the way that they just said, this is over. Do not call him anymore about this, and just left me holding the bag. And so I'm sitting here. Okay, wrestling's y'all's world. NASCAR's my world. I've made my living in this garage for the last 10 years, and luckily still right here in 2017, I'm still making my living in that garage. And to be able to do that, I went through a lot. I had to make a lot of people whole on some things, and I paid a lot of money, and I paid people to work until they could find jobs because they had come to work for us, and a lot of things. And it's like they didn't care. They didn't care. They just boom, and so they left me hanging, with that, and I handled it. And
did Rock ever call you and kind of give his opinion on it? Or
I saw him one time at the racetrack in Texas. He had come maybe on one of his movie premieres. This is several years later. He was at the racetrack. I wanted, come in to do an appearance to promote a movie, and all he said to me was, "I know you're mad at me," and that was it. It wasn't. It just the whole thing. I don't know, and that's.
I'd be more pissed off at that than I would anything else.
And look, it's been 16 years. I don't want any money.
No, I know.
I don't want any of that. But I would have thought sometime along the line, and I'm proud of what he's accomplished. I mean, I got to know him pretty well back in those days, and he overcame a lot to make it happen for himself. I mean, worked hard. I considered him to be a genuinely nice guy. Probably still is. But at the time, when your career and your life is in the hands of a guy named Vince McMahon, he says, "Don't you do that." This is, he didn't have a choice at the time. I understand.
I understand he didn't have a choice, but it seems like he would have given you a phone call or
that's what I'm saying. If it wasn't the next week or the next month, maybe, or when I saw him at the racetrack at Texas, just anything to, I just wanted him to know what I went. I mean, I went through 3 years of hell, in that situation, trying to, figure all that out. And I mean, spent time in court, paid lawyers, got sued. First time I've been sued in my life, and I worked it all out, no problem. And it just, I was just thinking maybe one of these times, somewhere along the line, he'd just say, "Man, looking back, I wish I'd have done this. We should have done that." And looking back, I wish I'd have done things different. Looking back now, I should have called the office or make sure, but that wasn't my part of the deal.
Well, if you went to the office, you must assume that would have gone up the chain of command enough to know.
I would assume, even though we never had a conversation, I never asked him, "Rock, have you talked to Vince?" But I figured since I went to their office and was talking to their sponsorship people and their marketing people and showing them T-shirt samples and all that, I figured he talked to somebody.
You'd think they would love for someone like you, and knowing they had a relationship with you, would have loved to have gotten into that business because it's.
I think they probably would at the time, but the problem was it wasn't their idea first.
Yeah.
It didn't start with them and do it like they wanted to do it. And I certainly would not have done it and taken the steps that I took. But once we agreed what we were doing and had a plan, this is November. I got to be in Daytona in February. And so, as you can imagine, it's a lot of things to get done in a short period of time. And what bothered me more than anything else is, the issues that I had to work out with some people that were dear friends of mine. Mm-hmm. That when you have legal issues with people that are, and as I sit here right now, it cost me $750,000. But I worked it out. I'm still working. I'm taking care of my family, and I'm fine. But, it's always bothered me all those years that
it's a principle
somebody wouldn't say, "Dude, man, I'm sorry."
For me, it'd be more about the money, I think. But for someone like you,
Well,
I
man,
think the
say him under
principles-
$50,000 is say him under $50,000.
I know.
You know, but a phone call just to say, dude, I'm so sorry I put you in that situation at that time. And I'd like to know more about his side of it. What happened?
Right.
What did we do wrong? What did you ask? What didn't you ask? And, you know, and I guess in a way, right now it doesn't matter. But, you know, every time I see him, and while I'm, you know, he's probably the biggest box office star going these days.
Yeah.
And so, and I know in his heart, I know him well enough to know from back in those days, in his heart, he was terrified at what he was doing to me at that time. I know it. But, you know, when is he, or is he going to take that step, you know, to just tell me what happened. Tell me what,
Yeah,
you know.
because he doesn't have to kneel to Vince anymore for sure.
But I wasn't going, you know, I don't care what I had, papers, you know, voicemails, whatever. I knew what I was in for, and I wasn't going to spend $300,000 or $400,000 to try to get something to court. I'd already spent $750. I know how that road goes, and I wasn't going to do it, so I decided to take my medicine and move on.
Well, if that would have gone through, what would have been, I guess, the concept? What would have been? Would he just kind of been the face of the company?
Yeah, you know, we were going to position him as the owner of the team, and I was going to run the day-to-day operations. He was going to be the owner. He presented, even at that time, before he really took off in the box office world, he was already going to be a great link to us, to other potential sponsors, investors, those kind of things. Merchandise. Mm-hmm. That's what I don't really understand. I went and had a meeting with the WWE people about merchandise and how to split that and what we could do and all these things.
Oh, so you were even going to share some?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, die-cast cars, you know, of that car with his design. It's another, you know, we felt like we could, you know, generate enough money, crossover with the merch side of it to go a long ways towards, you know, funding, you know, the team. And he was set up, Rock was set up the way we did our deal, that he was never going to have to come out of his pocket financially. You know, whatever, it was up to me to take his ownership and his participation. And
how much of a time commitment would it have required of him? Do you think that had anything to do?
He just come to the races when he wanted to. You know, he was simply an owner by stature. Mm-hmm. You know, just, hey, this is your team. Come join us anytime you want to. But he was not going to be burdened with day-to-day operations, and he was not going to be. He would never. I made a guarantee in writing that he would never have to come out of his pocket. So if I couldn't take the tools that we had, either sell a sponsorship or get more investors or create revenues through merchandise, if I didn't have enough money to fund this team through those channels, I was responsible for funding it out of pocket, which I was prepared to do because I felt that comfortable and confident in what we were doing and where he was and where I was and what was going on. And I still feel that confident, but it was no strain, time commitment, or financially on him. He was never going to have to come out of pocket.
And I know this is probably going to be ignorance about racing, but why would you not go to like somebody else and just say, hey, I'll just take the Rock's name, put someone else's there, and maybe it's not quite.
Yeah, I was so pissed off, disenchanted, mad at myself for the decision that I made to put my family in that position. Like my dad tells me sometimes you just got to cut your losses and move on. And throughout my life, whether it be my driving days or now working for Fox, auto racing and NASCAR as a whole has been very good to me. And been able to make a good living and support my family and all that. I look back now, and that was a mistake I made, and I just decided at that point that I was never going to depend on somebody else or have somebody else like that situation that could control me like that and put me in that situation. So I wasn't going to do that. Plus, you know, I really considered us to be friends.
Sure. At
the time. You know, to do something, to see a guy, you know, that he's making a life for himself like he is, and to where he came from, and to where we all think he's going, And to be able to do something fun like that with a friend of yours like that, I mean, that was a perfect scenario. And he, people need to understand, back in 2000, he was certainly getting more and more popular, but he wasn't like he is now, the crossover mainstream celebrity. So I felt like it was going to pay benefits to him also to get some crossover attention, media attention, more mainstream at that time, back in 2001. I thought we could raise his profile as well by, hey, here's a guy at this age that's doing this, and man, he owns a NASCAR team too. I mean, nobody outside of our little group needed to know financially what was going on and who was guaranteeing the monies and all that. To me, it's like, what does it say about this guy at his age? Man, he's doing all this and climbing the ladder, and he's involved in a NASCAR team, and get more people that maybe not know him at the time would help him maybe, and WWE at the time. And I just wish, looking back, that I would have had an opportunity before my throat was cut, to go sit down with the proper people at the WWE office and have a conversation about it. Here's my side of it. Here's what I've done. Here's what we've signed. But it wasn't like that. I sent them copies of everything I had. 2 days later, they sent me one of those nice letters, and don't call him anymore. This is done. And just kind of dare you to pursue it. And I knew better than that.
I mean, obviously the amount of time we just talked about it, something still, means something to you today. And
sure.
Now you're not in your 20s anymore. Now you're in your late 40s. I mean, looking back on it now, do you wish you would have done anything differently with it?
No.
You still happy cutting your losses and moving on?
Yeah. I mean, I'd already put my family in a, to go home and tell your wife, that, because she was okay with all of it, but I didn't tell my wife everything and every day that, she just assumed that I was taking care of things like I'd always done, and I'd find a way to make it work. That's what I had done my whole life. And so, at that time, and I know in his heart at that time, that was something that we both felt like, this is going to be fun, and it's going to be neat as hell too. And that's kind of the way it started. And then it was a tremendous dose of reality. Taught me a lot about people and things, and I learned a lot from it.
Expensive lesson though.
Yeah, I thought, should I try to pursue this? But I mean, it would have broke me. I know how difficult it is to get major players, to finally in front of a judge. It takes a long time and a lot of money, and I wasn't willing to dig that hole deeper. Right. So, luckily I worked it all out, and I can still walk through the NASCAR garage as a competitor or as a broadcaster and look everybody in the garage in the eye, and I don't know, everybody's good. I don't owe anybody anything, and it took me several years to get out of that, but I did, and I've moved on.
All right, well, Rock, if you're listening, I think this man is owed an explanation. Give him a call. I'm sure you can find
it. It wasn't all his fault at the time,
but
it'd just be nice to hear his side of it and kind of put it to bed, but I'm sincerely...
And that's the worst part about it when you do business with friends and if the business sours.
I've learned, through a lot of other things in my life, not nearly as costly as that, doing business with friends is tough. And being partners with friends is just about impossible. Mm-hmm. Because when it comes to money, there's always decisions to be made. How much money do you put in, and what's the plan moving forward to get a return on this money? And you very, very seldom agree, on the roadmap to get there. So, but look, it was a tremendous lesson to me. And I was getting ready to say that I'm personally couldn't be happier for him and everything that he's accomplished. I'm still bitter about that whole thing, but I'm not going to wish any ill will towards anybody, and he's done great, and I'm happy for him, and just looking back, things just didn't have to be that way, and it's a shame they were.
Yeah. Man, if I was in your shoes, I'd be running away from wrestling forever, and then you didn't.
No, I try to explain to people, I've had a lot more, now I'm not going to say financially, but I've had a lot more great experiences and good experiences and friendships. I've gotten a lot more out of wrestling than it's taken from me. When I look at, all the friends I have, and the bonds that I've made, and the people that I've been able to help through the years in this industry. And so one might say, after you got that done to you, how could you ever want to be involved in wrestling again? But not long after that, 2002, Jeff Jarrett called me and said, hey, me and my dad have got this crazy idea for TNA Wrestling. We're going to do Wednesday night pay-per-views, and we're going to do this, and this. We need some crossover media. We need some attention. We need some investors. We need some help. Will you help us? And I said, sure, I will. So, I tried to get involved and help them as much as I could, putting them in touch with investors and making contacts with people, and, appeared on some of their shows early on, just to try to put more eyeballs on the product. And so, I went from one project to the other, but I knew this, getting involved in a second project wasn't going to cost me $750,000.
Well, maybe not initially, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they probably said, hey, how much do you want to be involved? Take us back, because I think people take for granted how long TNA and Jeff Jarrett and TNA have been around. But take us back to I guess even before the first pay-per-view. What do you remember?
Yeah, Jeff had just departed WWF and was doing some soul searching. His wife Jill had some health problems, and he was going through a lot, with that. And him and his Jeff and his dad Jerry used to come up and hunt with my brother and my dad, every year. So, we had a connection, with that family. And when Jeff approached me, I could just tell, he was passionate about. Of course, he had a chip on his shoulder too. Right. But the way that I looked at it was really simple. Two things. Jeff Jarrett's a friend of mine, and he asked me for my help, so I'm going to help him. And two, by that time, because of all my interactions and relationships and things in the industry, I had a lot of friends, and a lot of them weren't working at the time. So I'm thinking also, if I can somehow help them get this project off the ground, I'm going to help a buddy, and then some other people that I know that need work are going to get some work out of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, anything after that is gravy. So I was more than happy to, at the time, help Jeff and Jerry in the capacity that I could. And Sterling Marlin and some of my other NASCAR buddies came in and made some appearances and tried to, just trying to create more awareness for what they were doing, because it was different, what they were doing at the time. And went all the way up till I had a pay-per-view match, with Ron Killens in Nashville. So that was fun for me. I was trying to help a friend, and I look at things, in the big scheme of things. I was able to, in my opinion, help in a little small way, help them get over some humps early on, and then then they ran into some more problems later on, and when Dixie Carter came on the scene. So it's been if you look
didn't
back,
have any involvement in bringing Dixie aboard.
No, I met her through she was initially contacted as somebody to try to help find investors for the company, and she had a public relations background, music management background, so she was contacted and brought in to help find some people, some investors to come in to keep the company afloat. And then, as most people know, she ended up with Bob and Janice, her parents, making an investment into the company and basically, buying a majority share of the company. And at that time, if she doesn't come in, about 3 weeks later, that company's gone. So you can say what you want to about Dixie Carter and how she ran the business, and whether you like it, don't like it, Dixie's a dear friend of mine. And say what you want to about the rest of it. She came in at a time when nobody else was willing to step up, and she stepped up, put her money where her mouth was, and provided a lifeline for that company to continue to evolve and develop, and, as I mentioned before, employ a lot of people that I wanted to see get help. And I tell you, a lot of people don't know this, but you know, there was a time when Jeff and Dixie were together with that company. They were making some headway. You know, they were closing the gap. I mean, they were doing some good business domestically, had some nice international deals going. They were turning some pretty good revenue at one time. And then, of course, you know, the personal stuff with Jeff and Dixie happens, and Jeff's out, and you know, it starts a big snowball effect of things, and it's always easy to go back and second guess questions and decisions, and who'd you bring in, and who did this, who did that. But you know, eventually put the company in a tough spot. But Dixie came in and gave life to that company when nobody else was there to do it.
I was just thinking, as an investor, it's got to be a hard sell, especially company number two. I mean, there's WWE, but anybody else. I mean, there never seems to be like as an investor.
Right.
You look at it and you think, well, what do I get out of this? How do I ever actually make money here? It doesn't seem like it'd be very.
It doesn't, but I was really
sell.
surprised at the amount of revenue that TNA Impact Wrestling at one time was generating.
I'd be surprised too.
They had some horsepower. I mean, they had some good things going. And if you can go back and rewind the clock to before the personal issues with Jeff and Dixie happened, I would have liked to have seen another couple years of direction there. Who knows what have happened, if it had worked or not or whatever, but it's easy now to look back and say, you know, when Jeff left, you know, things were more difficult. You had a constant stream of people, you know, Bischoff, Hogan, this person, that person, and a lot of people made a lot of money coming on that show and doing all that, but the company was going broke the whole time.
Yeah, I was going to ask specifically what you thought about the time where they decided to kind of like leave the path that they had started that maybe wasn't 100% successful, but you said they were making some inroads, and they reached out to Hulk Hogan, or they reached out to any of the old guys that WWE didn't want anymore, and they were just kind of like just giving the money over almost directly to the guy.
Yeah, I felt, you know, and I gave Dixie my opinions from afar. You know, she is very successful, her family is very successful, and I was never in a position to where I would try to tell somebody how to spend their money or how to run a company. But I did, as a friend, tell her that I was concerned about, you know, the direction that and the people she were bringing in. They changed the ring back to a square, and you know, all that's okay, you know. But personally, I felt like she got taken advantage of in some of those times.
What did she say to you when you said you were concerned about the direction you were headed?
Well, she was, and rightfully so, let me say this, but she was all in, you know, on Hogan and Bischoff. She felt like that was going to be the jump start, you know, that they needed to get over the hump and then some. And I don't, you know, if your gut tells you, and I understand that side of it too, if you're in that situation and you're trying to grow your company, you're trying to create awareness internationally for a lot of different reasons, and you can bring Hulk Hogan to the table, maybe you got to take that chance. Maybe, you know, maybe you got to, you know, maybe you need to try that to try to get your company noticed, or, you know, maybe even to get a meeting. You know, same way with Sting and some of those guys. I mean, they can enable you to get a meeting with people maybe that, you know, who back in 2002 knew who AJ Styles was, or 2003. I mean, great guy, great performer, and he's finally getting his chance today.
Right.
But back in those days, is a big merchandising company going to take a meeting because you got AJ Styles? You know, that gave them immediate name and brand recognition. But I felt like, given the financial situation as from the outsider, as I knew it, I just didn't feel like they were going to be able to sustain that for very long, and I was concerned about people using the company Impact at the time, you know, for personal gain, getting on TV, and I'm not really sure. I wasn't really sold completely, and of course I didn't know. Just my opinion, that I was a little concerned that maybe they weren't personally invested in the long-term health of the company as maybe they should have been. But that's just a personal opinion that that I formed, you know, from afar. So I mean, decisions were made, changes were made, and it just put the company in an awkward position because you had old school guys coming back in to try to relaunch the company per se, and you had a lot of people there that had been there since day one. A lot of younger guys and girls that had put in a lot of work to try to build, and it was. And I went backstage to Orlando many times, and it was just a lot of tension, back there. But I don't blame anybody for trying. I don't fault Dixie at all. If you feel like, hey, I got a chance to get Hulk Hogan, and launch the company, okay. But at the end of the day, when you're paying 6 or 7 people to do the job that Jeff Jarrett was doing by himself before, it doesn't take long. You have to, if you're going to grow that big, you have to generate those revenues in much larger sums in a short period of time, and that was very difficult.
Before they split, you were saying that when they were working together, things started happening and stuff. What do you think really needed to happen to get them to that next level that we always kind of hoped they would get to?
Well, they certainly needed a spark of some kind. I don't say that I have all the answers to that. I'm just saying I could see the company growing. I'd rather lay one brick at a time on the foundation and grow it like that than I would, go for the Hail Mary. And I was really concerned because Jeff Jarrett and Dixie Carter, I both think a lot of, and as much as they disagreed on certain things, and I always felt like they were better together because Dixie had her strengths and Jeff had his strengths, and I think they both played off each other and needed each other at the time. But I think people want to see consistency. People that are going to invest or do business with a company or offer a TV contract or whatever, they want to see consistency. They don't want to see constant change and turmoil. And so if they did nothing more than keep building the way they were building one day at a time, and they were reaching more and more people, I think they had a shot, that way. And then unfortunately,
Where do you think their growth potential was? Was it like international TV contracts? Was it live show business?
I think mostly the international TV side, I feel like was a big potential for them, for growth. And you have to create that brand awareness, as as long as you've been involved in wrestling and, live events, house shows, all that. It's difficult unless you've got a sustained brand name that people trust. Because I remember back when I was running shows, and you were helping me a lot back in those days, you make contacts with buildings and venues, and you're talking to the wrestling fans online about things. And, we had some really talented cards back in the UWF, because when I first started, my thought process is we got to have WrestleMania type matches from top to bottom. And so we spent a lot of money, or I did, to put these wonderful shows together. And you call people and say, hey, I've got so-and-so coming in. Like, yeah, right. Last guy came in here, advertised all these people, nobody showed up. So I was constantly fighting a negative stigma of live event wrestling at that time, because some people were running shows and not delivering what they advertised.
Especially down here in the South, where you
especially here. So I felt the same way with. I just felt like before they tried to do too much too soon, to just stay out of the news. Just build your company and your brand a little bit at a time. Build that trust between the people that you're dealing with and the people you're talking to. Jeff's been, involved in the business forever, and his family. And I think that sometimes when you try to do too much too soon, like, what do you want to be good at? And so, but it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. But I know a lot of the things that they were fighting were the same things that I was fighting at the time. It's WWE and it's everybody else, and people were just timid when it came to making deals or signing contracts or doing whatever. And I just think the timing of when that whole thing happened, it couldn't have been at a worse time, for Impact.
For people that, the younger guys that, don't remember from 10 years ago, because wrestling fans, they kind of turn over a lot. So we got a lot of fans now that they don't even know what happened with UWF or TNA. Yeah. You had the first TNA house shows,
right?
And remind me, was that something you asked them, or they kind of asked you? How did that begin? Where they actually let you use their name?
Yeah, Jeff, more so Jeff, but Jeff and Dixie, once she was involved, reached out to me, and their first roadmap to doing TNA house shows was to license the brand to different promoters in different areas. That was their first way they wanted to do it. So they, through my friendship with Jeff, and I had just, met Dixie and all that, they reached out to me, and because I had interest too, and I had voiced some interest to them as well about wanting to get involved and do some of that. So that's basically what that was early on. It was they licensed the brand to me for the purposes of running shows in a certain territory. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. And eventually the day came where they wanted to try to run their own, which they had mixed results with theirs as well.
Well, I think they kind of looked at some of yours because, in all of live wrestling, I mean, you had a mixed bag. There were some shows that was really awesome, and there were some that, you wonder what you're doing. I
learned that you never could tell what you're going to get.
Never.
And that's why and I go back to the time part. If I'd have had time, when I could make my time when it wasn't racing season, I could go into I usually try to run 2 shows a weekend, a Friday and Saturday. I would personally take time and drive to that town. And I know a lot of it had to do with because I had a name, people liked racing, they knew who I was. I could go through a town on a Friday and a Saturday and sell enough sponsorships to pay the bills for those shows. So whatever tickets I sold was gravy. And when I didn't have time to do that, I sometimes got hurt. Yeah. But, you'd have a show on a Friday night, you'd have 200. Saturday night, we'd have 1,200. You just never knew. But I learned a lot, through the course of that. So I did the TNA licensed shows that featured just TNA talent. Then when they decided they want to do their own shows, we went into kind of transitioned over to UWF and continued to do shows. And then we could kind of use some of the TNA talent that we liked, and we could add in some of the some of the old school people that I wanted to bring in and do some things.
Did you lose any interest when you knew you were going to lose the name?
No.
So you looked at this still as a viable business.
I made money with my shows. I mean, when it was all said and done, it was never about not making money. It was about the time that I knew I was going to have to put in to make sure that I didn't lose money. I didn't have the time in those days, and unfortunately still don't now, to go into those towns and spend that time and get the $200 and $300 sponsorships and sell the meet and greet tickets. And boy, I learned a lot in those days, because not only was I doing things differently, I was selling sponsorships, selling tickets, and then you had some of the old school more established guys. They come in, they're like, I'm not doing a meet and greet. I'm like, the hell you ain't. So I butted heads with a lot of those guys and girls eventually, and finally I learned that it's going to be done my way. And people knew, at least when they came to my shows, that if they came to work for me, they were going to get paid, and I was going to take care of them, put them in a nice hotel, and do all that. And you have to draw that line between friendship and business. But I was really proud there for a couple of years. We provided a nice, consistent alternative for some of the guys and girls that were in TNA and some other independent, wrestlers that I'm friends with, that you were friends with also. Give them a nice, steady, consistent place to work, for that period of time. And if I still had time, I still love it. I'd still do it. But somebody, to make those shows work consistently now, you got to go door to door and knock on doors and do all that, and it just takes too much time.
And I can tell you from trying ourselves that it can't just be any person.
No. It's got to be somebody that when they open the door, they know who you are.
Yep.
And I was able to.
We tried to hire people to do it.
Yeah, it doesn't. If you find somebody in that town and pay them to go put up flyers and sell tickets, they can't do it. But I could go, for half a day in one town, half a day in another town. I'd have my $7,500 in sponsorships to pay my talent, And then, of course, I wanted to have a full building. It was better for you. You sold more merch, whatever. But I knew, right, wrong, or indifferent, I had done my part, and I had enough money to buy plane tickets and pay the wrestlers, and that was, if I could do that, provide a place for them to work, and I had so much fun. I mean, it was, and we had our moments, that anytime you walk into a building, and you're paying the tab for everybody, and you're the only one in the building that's not making money, that gets difficult sometimes.
Listen, you taught me something. It's why I don't run shows.
Yeah.
It's because I watched how much, how much effort it takes, and it's that when you said it that way, it's like you do all the work, and the wrestlers get paid, and the vendors make their cut, but it sucks.
And I learned, there was some shows that I wasn't involved in that I lost $7,000-$8,000 a night because when I first started out, like I told you before, I wanted to have the independent shows that everybody talked about. I wanted to have top name talents from top to bottom, and then through you gave me some good advice, and of course Jeff Jarrett and some others. I didn't need all that, So my shows kind of evolved to where, towards the end, we still had big names in the main event, but we also provided a lot of other younger people coming in that were trying to get their foot in the door. They'd come in and sweep the floor, put the ring together, set up tables, do whatever, and go wrestle for $100, trying to make a name for themselves. And so we ended up having a nice mixture of main event people that people knew, and new young talent that was hungry and eager and put on the best matches. So that's kind of how my company, evolved through the years. But, I realized I had to do the majority of the legwork financially on the money side to make sure that I was going to be not put myself in a situation where we were throwing money away.
Yeah, and I always appreciated, you always asked my opinion on like which guys to book in town, and you allowed me to put guys like Samoa Joe and AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels, the guys that like I knew had not been really discovered yet.
Yeah,
and then,
we ended up with a nice mix, and I will say this, I don't care if it's wrestling or the car business or the tiddlywink business, you're never going to make everybody happy all the time, but I would have to say 99.9% of the time we sent everybody home. We delivered what we said we were going to deliver on a show, and did it in nice venues, and had nice equipment, and and for the most part had a few issues here and there, but for the most part, even the older veteran guys and girls, once they got to know me and realized what kind of opportunity we were providing, I got to say that most every time everybody came in and busted their butt to put on a good show, whether it was in front of 100 people or 1,500 people.
I remember you gave a chance to Jeff Hardy at a time when he was really struggling with life. And
he. I remember, and at that time, I knew Jeff a little bit. Hadn't been around him personally much, but been around him some. And I'd heard through the grapevine that he was having some problems, and his then girlfriend, now wife, Beth, called me up and said, I hear you're running some shows. And she said, Jeff wants to come work some of your shows. We hear good things about him. And, of course, I went to talk to some of the people in my circle about bringing him in, and everybody told me, you can book him all you want to, but he won't show. He's no showing everybody. He won't show. I said, well, maybe he won't, but he's never done that to me. And every show I booked him on, he came in, he showed up, he was on time, worked his butt off, and whatever I asked him to do, meet and greets, signing, whatever. And I was happy that I provided some stability, I feel like, at a time that he needed it. And also I think I provided some friendship and some support to him when he needed it. And through the course of time, as I sit here right now, I mean, him and his wife and his kids, I mean, they are really close personal friends of me, my wife, and our kids. I mean, we vacation together with them, every summer. and we made a nice bond. And the best thing that I can tell people, and Ruby and Nira are both, beautiful little kids, and the best thing that I can tell people is, like, when I first met Jeff, I opened up to him and I was friends with him, but I kind of kept my distance personally because of all the things that I had heard and knew or whatever. And over time, now, I welcome him and his family into my home every year. And I trust my kids at his house. And so that's the biggest compliment I can pay somebody is, you're welcome in my house and my kids are welcome at your house. And I'm just really proud of the person that he is now and the father that he is and the things that he's overcome. And I don't know a more genuine, nice person in this industry than Jeff Hardy. So, I know a lot of people have had different experiences. You can say that, really with anybody, but I don't think he has ever purposely hurt anybody. He certainly has battled through some things, but I consider him now to be one of my best friends, and I'm proud of it.
No, he's a superb individual, and it's usually when you hear like the stuff that he was going through in wrestling, it doesn't end well. But
right,
he's
him and Matt both, for that matter. They
at different times.
Yeah, they both have had, and I look back now, they lost their mom at a very, very young age. They didn't have that mother touch or guidance that I had. And when I look back now at some of the things they had to overcome and what they had to do and the things they've accomplished, and I've been around both of them when they were struggling. And to me, that makes me respect both of them more now because I've seen where they were, and I see potentially where they are now. And I think having good women, good wives, and more important than anything else, when I see Jeff interact with Ruby and Nira, and when I see Matt interact with his kids, that tells me all I need to know about them, right now. So I hope they continue on the right path. I'm glad to see that they've got an opportunity that they have now with WWE. I think it was time for that to happen for both sides, and I hope it's a happy ending to that story for everybody involved.
I was going to save this part for the end because I know it's kind of more topical, but you're good friends with Jeff, and I certainly see his side of things on this debate, and then you're
Jeff Hardy, you mean?
Or Jeff Jarrett,
and
you're friends with Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, and
right.
Obviously they've had their differences on how things ended for their relationship with Impact. What is your perspective?
Well, it's been kind of interesting because we were all on a group chat together, before all this went down. We would all, like send a funny note or send a funny video. We were all, the Jarretts, the Hardys, all of us, my wife.
Vacation together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we, and only thing I can tell you is, I'll tell you, now I want to be perfectly clear. I have not spoken to Matt Hardy on this issue. I have had some conversations with Jeff Hardy and Beth, and of course, Jeff Jarrett and Karen. I've had some, because I want to know. Both sides are friends of mine, so I want to know what's going on. But I'll say the same thing that I told Jeff Hardy, same thing I told Jeff Jarrett, and what I truly believe. If the Hardys legally own that broken gimmick intellectual property, they should get it. And they should also be reimbursed for any attorney's fees they've had to spend to try to get it. If that intellectual property belongs to Impact / Global Force Wrestling, they should get it or keep it and have the opportunity to monetize it or sell it or whatever the case may be. And I've been like everybody else, waiting for a lawyer or a judge to come out and say, this is who owns this intellectual property. And all I've seen is people getting on social media, trying to put little things out there, trying to win the court of public opinion, per se. And this has been on both sides.
True.
I haven't, I don't really think that you should go on social media and make comments or make posts about somebody's family or or a company that some of your friends are still working for. And at the same time, I don't think Ed Nordum should have posted pictures of Matt Hardy's contract online. To me, that's grandstanding on both sides. And you're grandstanding to people that can't help you resolve the situation. One thing about wrestling fans that are just like racing fans, they see everything through the eyes of who they like. Mm-hmm. So, how many people are not fans of the Hardys? Right. So obviously, if you go on social media or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, there's millions of Hardy fans that are going to say, yeah, it's theirs. Jeff Jarrett is a POS and this and that and the other. But I don't even know the legal answers to it. And it's been a terrible strain on a lot of people, because I know somewhere deep inside all of them, they still care about each other. I've been around them enough to know. But I'm still waiting for the judge or the attorneys together to make a decision. I don't know but to me, until then, Matt and Jeff have a great opportunity with WWE. I don't think anything that Matt or anybody in his family can say or continue to fester that can help them in WWE moving forward. And, Jeff Jarrett was put in all this stuff with this intellectual property thing took place before Jeff was brought back.
Right.
He wasn't there. So it's easy for people to say, Jeff Jarrett, you're a bad guy. Why are you holding this from them? They brought Jeff back in and said, okay, we've got a company that's bankrupt. We owe most of our talent large sums of money. And by the way, we've got this intellectual property mess with the Hardys. We need you to fix all this. So, I don't have anything that's told me that WWE has been interested in this intellectual property that Global Force has. Looks like to me they're using a variation of that, or plan to in the future use a variation of that, and it'll work fine. Mm-hmm. So I just I just don't understand. I wish people would handle disputes between themselves, and if you have to be through a lawyer, fine. But on both sides, why go to social media to try to incite all that, when I look at there's a lot of people that are potentially affected by these conversations online that are still working for Global Force or these other companies trying to make a living. And so I don't know what the resolution is, because I don't know enough about it to know.
Do you think it's a losing battle for Global Force or Impact, whoever is, I guess, on this side of it, to fight? Because I'm not really sure what they gain if they end up winning the intellectual property dispute. I'm not really sure what they gain by not having the talent to perform it. It's not like you can make a fake Jeff and a fake Matt Hardy in this day and age. And I
think a lot of it, again, from the outside looking in, I think it's principle. I think that because, and I want to be clear again, because I'm friends on both sides of the equation, but and I don't know how much money was offered, and I don't know if there was cuts of independent shows, proceeds, but I do know that Matt and Jeff were both offered contracts to stay at Global Force Wrestling. And I believe to be true that they were going to be the highest paid talents on the roster. Now, they may have been terrible deals. They may have been not near enough money. They may have asked for cuts of their merchandise and things. All that may very well be true or not. I do not know. But I do know that they were offered contracts to stay at Global Force Wrestling, and they made a decision not to, which is certainly in their right. So, so I'm with you. I don't see where Global Force Wrestling gains anything by trying to, keep something. But when something is yours, it's yours. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I would be concerned about if I'm Global Force Wrestling, it's not really how this is related to the Hardys per se, is how about the next one that comes along? Are you just going to give that away?
Right.
I think it more sets precedent and principle for how intellectual properties in wrestling, you can't just let people bully you or take something for you that you believe is yours. But Global Force Wrestling is not going to win a popularity battle with the Hardys. They're just not, you know. But if something is mine, and I feel like it's mine, and somebody's trying to take it from me, especially somebody that's not working for my company anymore, I can see why it would be important to stand your ground, because there'll be a time, if Global Force Wrestling is able to survive and prosper, there'll be another time that something will come along that will happen involving an IP or a contract situation, and you know, somebody will say, well, you let the Hardys take theirs, but right now, I'll say it again, I think it's the perfect time and situation for Matt and Jeff and their families to be back in WWE. I mean, you've got, you know, another run for them, I would assume, possibly Hall of Fame and all these other things. And Jeff Jarrett over there, I mean, he's got a mess to clean up. He does not need to be spending his time, you know, worrying about what's going on with people that are even no longer in the company. And then on top of all that, I just know from conversations on both sides that it's been a strain personally, and it's hurt a lot of feelings and between a lot of people that I know legitimately, you know, care for each other. I mean, so I'm waiting. I want to hear a decision, and whatever is legally the right thing to do, I hope that's what happens. And because as we go, the longer it drags on, nobody's going to win anymore. It's a bad situation.
I want to talk more about the UWF times and you know, your just your thoughts as being a promoter and stuff. I always felt like wrestling and racing have a similar audience, crossover audience, but no one's ever really tried to put the two together and kind of create the synergy that could be from those two. I know it's always been a thought of yours. We ran a couple of shows that were like in Martinsville.
Yeah.
It was kind of close to the race. Do you feel there's a potential there if someone really wanted to get involved and put the two together? There's a synergy and you could create something that just really hasn't been tapped yet?
Sure. Probably more so 10, 15 years ago than now, because I think the NASCAR fan, and not in a good way, has changed. You know, the NASCAR fan, we had we've somehow missed a generation, you know, with the NASCAR fan, you know, with the internet and computers and different things. I mean, even my own kids, they grew up with me going to the racetrack, and they're not connected with our sport these days. So I think NASCAR needs to go back and try to figure out a way to educate and or introduce itself to younger fans again, because we don't have as many younger, you know, I know the demographic's 18 to 35, but I mean even younger than that, the 12 to 15, 18, we've got to get them back, you know, to the track.
It's tough to ask a teenager to get involved in a sport when you're going around a couple hundred times.
Yeah, and so
DNA anymore.
They're slowly starting to get that way. By that I mean having more events at the racetracks. I mean having concerts and different things to attract young people. And okay, by the way, while you're here, you know, go watch the race. So, but NASCAR's got a tough job in trying to re-identify what their fan base is with the younger generation, because we've, you know, since there's no Petty, Waltrip, Allison, Earnhardt, you know, Dale Jr.'s retiring after this year, Tony Stewart retired last year, Jeff Gordon's retired, Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick are going to be soon, you know, moving on. So who's the next star? And we've got a lot of young stars in our sport, like a Kyle Larson. You probably never even heard Kyle Larson's name. He's the hottest thing going in NASCAR right now, and he comes from a kind of an open wheel dirt background, very, very talented, winning lots of races. But our fans don't have any connection to him. You know, he doesn't have the over the top, you know, personality. So we've got to find out how to get personality out of our up and coming stars. Same way with wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to find a way. If you're an up and coming driver in NASCAR, or if you're an up and coming performer in wrestling, you've got to find out a way. You got to have a personality, and you got to find a way to transpose that personality onto the people that are watching you. They got to have a connection with you. You know, back in the Earnhardt days, he was the blue collar. He was the Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was the anti-authority, blue collar guy, and everybody loved him. It didn't matter. He said what he thought, crashed people when they were in the way, and sold merchandise and did whatever. And same way with Austin back in his heyday. He was the anti-authority. Who doesn't want to cuss the boss out on TV every week and shoot the bird? And it was people connected with him like that. So we've got in the NASCAR world, a lot of these young drivers coming up through the lower divisions that are very, very talented. But how do we get them to connect with the fans like a Tony Stewart or something like that people, connect with? And so I think it would be a nice, and I know, I'm still on the board of directors with Global Force Wrestling, and I know we've had some conversations, with Jeff and the thing moving forward about, trying to find some ways to, work at the racetracks a little bit. Jeff has done some things at some minor league ballparks and stuff. We want to go back to the racetrack, try to cross over with the NASCAR fan, but at the same time have a ongoing objective to get more kids. The kids, my kids are grown now, but when my kids are growing up, I went where they wanted me to take them. So if we can get the kids involved, or introduce them to NASCAR or Global Force Wrestling, or even WWE reintroducing, they got a bigger machine to do all this with, but we've got to find a way to get that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, get that passion back and get them, hooked on something other than an iPad.
Yeah,
they got to get them to want to go out and go experience a race or experience a live wrestling event, or if not, I'm not sure where our next fans are coming from.
No, for sure. Let's talk about some of the UWF times and some of the highs and lows and some of the things at least I remember. Your memory's better than mine, but just remember, I thought like the peak of it was that show in Richmond.
Yeah.
Where you kind of brought everybody together. You had
Capital Punishment, we called it.
You had TNA, you had WWE, and I remember saying, Hermie, this isn't going to work. WWE's not going to let their guys on this show with TNA guys. And you go, yeah, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And I was like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And sure enough, Hermie pulled it off.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a War Games match, with two rings, and we had all of our typical TNA wrestlers on hand, and we had a pretty good contingent from WWE. Ron Simmons and JBL and Ricky Steamboat, I believe, was there, and a bunch of they worked together in the match a little bit. So that was a perfect example of course we comboed that show with an event to raise money for my foundation. My middle daughter Haley was diagnosed with autism back in 2002, so we kind of used that show as create awareness for autism, back in those days, and to raise money, which we ended up donating $25,000 off that show to the Faison School in Richmond. So everybody kind of came together for the, and from the time everybody showed up at that show that night, nobody ever questioned what we were doing or how we were going to do it. I can't be here with this person. I can't be here with that person. We just told everybody what we wanted to do, and they did it, and that goes back to my point earlier. I mean, I've got such great, friends, loyal friends that I've been able to do things for and help at a time when they needed it. And, I call Ricky Steamboat, and he comes right in. I call, JBL. I call, Ron Simmons, and these are people I still talk to today and, communicate with. And they came in, and it was a unique scenario at the time, but it was for a good cause, and I enjoyed that.
Sure. Another thing that stands out to me is I remember a very young Jay Lethal.
Oh, yeah.
I think he might have had his first drink.
With me.
With you?
Williamston, North Carolina. We had a show down there, and I'm going to assume for the purposes of this camera that he was 21.
For the purposes of this camera, yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think he turned 21 that morning.
Yeah, maybe that morning. So we all go out after the show, and I love the social aspect of it. I remember, Bill Barons and all them that were represent some of these wrestlers back in the day used to tell me, don't take them out to eat, don't have parties, don't do this, don't do that. And I'm like, I'll do what the hell I want to, So we had fun, And I think getting to know them on that more personal level, for the most part, when I needed something from them, if I needed an extra appearance or needed them to do something or go back, work an extra match or whatever, they did it. It was a, kind of a strength in the relationship. Yeah, but I remember we were in Williamston, North Carolina. We'd worked the show, and then we went to some restaurant/bar, and never forget it. He ordered an apple pucker, and he may have been 21, but his tolerance for alcohol was not very high because he drank one pretty rapidly, and I think as he opened his mouth to consume the second one, I think it hit him.
Yeah.
And he was entertaining after that.
I wish I would have had a camera when he was back at the hotel around the pool,
Mm-hmm.
and I think people would have been remarkably impressed with how athletic he was. So
Yeah,
he was entertaining.
And look, and I look back at those days with guys like him, and you mentioned Samoa Joe, and Petey Williams, and all these people that that UWF time I think was very, very important for them at that time because we gave them opportunities to work with some other high-level people, in some of the matches that we had, back in those days. I mean, it was some really good action.
And on top too, because like you a lot of your shows ended with AJ Styles
Sure.
or Samoa Joe, and
Right.
they were a hot item, but they were
Sure.
never put on like the main event level
Right.
at that point.
Mhm.
And I think,
But that proved to me back in those days, even when they weren't completely well known, maybe on TV or, nationally or whatever, people paid good money. The hardcore wrestling fans back in those
That's who they
days
wanted to see.
knew who they were, and they didn't care if we did the same match Friday night and Saturday night. The majority of them came to both because they wanted to see those matches live and in person night after night.
And I think it helped us performers realize, look, I'm the main event of this show.
Sure.
I need to wrestle like
Sure.
that, and,
Sure.
and
They stepped up. I can't remember a time ever when I didn't feel like that the guys and girls that were performing weren't giving everything. They'll quote mail it in. I don't ever remember having to have a conversation. Now, I wasn't at every show, so it could have very well happened. But the shows that I was at, whether ringside or in the back, I never felt like I had to have a conversation with anybody about not working hard. And that goes from, Caleb Conley, and Jake Manning and all these other people that were up and coming at the time, right on to the top, to Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Jeff Hardy, whoever it may be. When they came to my shows, I felt like they gave me all they had, and I've always appreciated that.
For sure. And some of the low points. I remember we did a tag tournament. I think it was in Columbia and Charleston.
It was 3 nights.
Three
nights, yeah.
What was the third night?
Charleston, Columbia, and maybe a Florence. Something like that. But it was going to be 3 nights. First night, what I remember, was at one of Rick Hendrick's car dealerships in Charleston.
Okay, yeah. I think that's where Scott Steiner tried to kill me.
Yeah, so he's been known to do that.
But it was like the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah, me and my brother grew up fans of the Rock and Roll Express, and so I had this idea, just at that time, trying to do something different. So I decided I was going to have a 3-day Rock and Roll Express tag team tournament. And how can you have a Rock and Roll Express tag team tournament without the Rock and Roll Express?
Right.
So, I wanted to have them on the show, and had planned to do that.
Yeah, what happened there?
So I'll tell the story. So we started putting it, and I did all of the, and looking back now, I should have probably been more firm with things or whatever, but I did all the talent negotiations with the people when I put them on the show. So at that time, we had the Dudleys and we had the Steiners and this and that. We had some heavy hitters, So I called, and Ricky Morton he had been on some shows that I'd been involved in, LAW shows and different things way back in the day. And he used to come to Bristol to the racetrack all the time, so I knew him. Not personally, but knew him a little bit. Anyway, so I called Robert Gibson first. At the time, Robert was working for WWE in some capacity. Not sure if he was an agent or doing something, but he was employed by WWE at that time. I called Robert Gibson. I said, hey, I'm having the Rock and Roll Express Invitational. I want you and Ricky to wrestle in it. And he said, man, that is awesome. Be glad to. I said, how much do you need me to pay you? He said, $400 a night, plus a hotel. Done. Okay. So then I called Ricky Morton. Called Ricky, and we had talked on the phone 45 minutes. I said, here's what I'm doing, man. I'm going to have the Rock and Roll Invitational. I want you and Robert to wrestle in it. He said, man, he called me Bubba. He said, that is awesome. I'm in. I said, what do you need? He said, $100 a night plus a hotel. I said, done. Didn't ask any questions. So this was a month prior. So on that, we started Thursday night. So me and Earl Hebner and Brian Hebner are driving down Interstate 95, headed towards Charleston. Earl's phone rings. And he starts having this animated conversation. It was Ricky Morton. And Earl says, you're going to have to talk to Hermie. So get on the phone, and Ricky, what's going on? And he had some not so pleasant things to say to me. But basically he said, how dare you book my partner and pay him $400 and book me and pay me $100. I said, Ricky, I paid your partner what he said he needed to come do the shows, and I paid you what I didn't negotiate at all. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. And so I talked to him for just a second, and I wasn't interested in having that kind of conversation with him, so I gave the phone back to Earl. So he told Earl to tell me that, this was maybe 1 o'clock. He told Earl to tell me that he wasn't coming to work unless I paid him the same thing I paid Robert. And I said, Earl, you can tell him that had he asked for that when I booked him, I would have gladly done it, but I'm not doing it today. I'm not going to be held over the barrel over money. So he didn't come. He no-showed us for those shows. And then I don't know exactly who, but I know sometime several months later he did a shoot interview with somebody and told everybody he was going to whip me, he's going to slap me and do all this, and I knew nothing about wrestling, and I was this and that, and I was bad for this and that, whatever, and all that, and I just kind of let it go. But about 2 years ago, I was at Bristol, on State Street in Bristol, doing an autograph session on that Food City race night, and he came up and spoke and apologized.
Oh, wow.
He apologized, and I accepted it, and we moved on. And luckily, he didn't punch me. So, but I don't know why that happened the way it did at the time. But I just wasn't going. We talk a lot about principle. He wasn't going to call me the day of the show.
Right.
If he'd asked me for $600 when I called him, I didn't know what he.
Right. You didn't know
what his going rate was. I mean, I didn't. It was 3 nights worth of work. I asked him, and no problem. And
it's funny because that has happened with them. Like if you book Ricky Morton, he has one price, and Robert has a different price. Mm-hmm. And if you book them together, you just most of the time, if they know in advance, they'll work it out.
Right.
But I mean the story you just told has happened hundreds of times. You would think it'd be very clear from their side. Like, this is my price if it's just me. This is my price if it's the two of us.
Yeah. So I don't. Maybe I didn't communicate, properly at the time, but I certainly told both of them. And it was the sad thing about the whole thing was, it was to honor them.
Right.
I wanted to have them on the show to honor them because I grew up a huge fan of theirs. And so Robert, I don't remember how we ended up doing it, but Robert came and worked, and we put somebody with him, and whatever. We made it work, but it wasn't the same, obviously, as if Robert had been there. But to his credit, he didn't have to, but he did apologize, and I thought the things he said about me were inappropriate at the time. But I wasn't going to try, just like I'm talking about this thing with the Hardys and Jarrett. You cannot get on social media if you're a target like I was in that case. You can't get on social media and defend yourself. You're wasting your time. So I just let it go. But we're good now.
Good. Another highlight of the UWF run, I'd say, was the Hardcore War Show in Philadelphia. You actually did 2, right?
Right, 2, yes.
But both of them were great. But that first
by
one,
far the highest grossing shows that we had in UWF, and I got to give a lot of credit to Jeremy Borash, especially for the first one, making some of those connections and hooking me up, helping me get things done and different things like that. But they were high grossing shows, very entertaining shows. And I remember one of them, Bubba Ray Dudley threw every chair in the building into the middle of the ring one night. Mm-hmm. So that scared me a little bit. But that building to I grew up a wrestling fan, but I never knew that much about ECW per se. Didn't have that much knowledge of the history of that building per se. It didn't mean as much to me as it did some of them. Right. So, once we got all that put together and to experience a couple of shows in that building was fun. And I was proud that we were able to take UWF up there and have a couple of successful shows.
Was there ever like a writing on the wall where because I remember a couple of times when the houses were down and the sponsorships weren't there, sometimes your wife would come and I felt really bad. I was thinking, Hermie's going to lose interest in this as soon as Angie does.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, she didn't have interest in it to begin with.
No.
She did it because I wanted to. But no, any business that you're in is going to be ups and downs and challenges, and I truly believe that any business you're in, you're going to get out of it what you're willing to put into it. And I just came to a crossroads on what was going on. I felt like I either needed to take another big step forward with it, and by that I mean grow the brand more, maybe enlarge the company, maybe have a conversation with you about different production things that I wanted to do and spend more money, or call it an experience and move on. And I just chose at the time because of what I knew it was going to take from me personally. And I had, car dealerships and other businesses, and I was racing and doing TV and all. I wasn't going to be able to, I was going to have to put somebody else in charge of it from start to finish. Mm-hmm. And I was not willing to do that from a business side, as well as I didn't want to have somebody else dealing with talent and friends of mine and different things if it wasn't me, because I always felt like I wanted to have a conversation with the person I was booking to put on my show so I could tell them what I was going to do, and they could tell me, we had a good understanding of what was expected both ways. There's no misunderstanding. And when I realized that I needed to either bulk up and do more to make my shows stand out, and it was going to be a time commitment on my behalf that, I don't mean to say this the wrong way, but I wasn't going to make enough money given the time that I was going to have to put in. True. Versus other things that I was involved in that were my livelihood that I did make money with.
And I do think it was a weird timing issue. I mean, it was before really. Now, when you advertise something, you have the social media, and it's a very inexpensive but a very wide-reaching way of finding people. And when you were running your shows, the Facebook and Twitter wasn't.
We were doing radio and TV spots.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're expensive.
Yeah,
they're
they are.
Expensive.
They are. That's what I'm saying. And I see so many people make mistakes, and I've made similar mistakes when you're running a business. Trying to tiptoe through a certain portion of it to see if it's going to work. And you just can't do that. If you're gonna run professional wrestling live events and all the things that go along with it, you've got to be all in my opinion. I'm not saying you can't have another business and it can't be something on the side, but you have to personally be involved more than I was able to commit to being involved at the time. And so we decided to stop, and since then I've last couple of years I've been on the board of directors at Global Force. Don't have anything to do with the daily operation, so nobody be calling me about the IP situation, but I do give advice. I was actually, had been working with Jeff with Global Force, working on setting up some meetings to work on some other television opportunities for Global Force when the opportunity with Impact circled back around. And I actually tried to talk Jeff out of going back.
Why?
I just, much like me with The Rock back in the, I just thought he should have just left it a clean cut and moved on to something else. I just didn't feel like. Plus, we were making some headway with Global Force Wrestling. I mean, we had some really good meetings with higher ups at networks that I felt
there was always rumors that they had like a TV deal almost in place.
We were getting there. Nope, and I was involved in some of that. I set up some of the contacts, and I mean, there were multiple follow-up meetings with high-level execs at several TV networks. So I felt like we were going to land something. I felt pretty confident in that. And then the opportunity, Jeff would call me and keep me abreast of what was going on with Impact and potentially Anthem. And my first gut reaction was, Jeff started focusing on that a little bit and not so much on the Global Force, and I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that he wanted to go back and say, "I told you so." Right. I didn't want it to be a spiteful thing that, okay, Dixie ran me off, and the company went down, and then they brought me back in. So I just told him, I said, "Jeff, just leave it alone."
Did maybe keeping him away had something to do with you were also friends with Dixie, and you felt like?
Not really. I mean, I never really thought about that part of it. I just, so many bad things had happened, and there was so much bad blood, and so many different agendas, and so many problems, and Jeff had put so much time, effort, work, money into Global Force, and it had been kind of, let's be honest, it wasn't really moving very fast. It wasn't getting off the ground. Things weren't happening. And it's just like, as a lot of things happen sometimes, as soon as we started making ground on moving things on the Global Force. In fact, Jarrett, last year, we were at the beach at the Outer Banks, and him and Karen left for a day and flew all the way to L.A., for one of these meetings, and then back to the beach in North Carolina, all in a day and a half. So I just felt like, Jeff, Global Force Wrestling we're finally starting to get some traction, and we're getting people to talk to us. Don't go back and rehash all that. But I tell you, Jeff, contrary to what people might think, he certainly does not agree with some of the business decisions that Dixie made, and he certainly, obviously, there's a little bit of friction because of the decisions that when she made to get rid of him for all these other reasons. He has a lot of respect for her. I mean, he's told me this in recent days. If it wasn't for her, the company would have been gone. Wouldn't even have mattered. And I've heard him in more than one setting stand up for her and what she did for the company and the talent at the time. And still believes that that she was integral in a lot of things that happened with with TNA / Impact. But so Jeff calls me and he says, "Hey, they've called me to come in," and started off he was just kind of advisory role, and then it kind of, I said, "Jeff, come on, man, you've been there, you've done that, you've been miserable for the last couple of years." But he was just adamant. He's got a real emotional tie to that brand, to Impact. Now I know they've changed the name and all that, but that's something that him and his dad started. And I know most people know that things have been kind of had some friction with him and his dad through the years. They hadn't always communicated or seen eye to eye, and I think that's better now. Than I think in Jeff's mind, he can go back and fix a lot of things that, admittedly so to him, he had a part in screwing up. He didn't always make the right decisions, and maybe he was selfish in certain things and whatever. I think he feels like he's got an opportunity to circle back around and see a happy end to something that started off with so much promise, and he had so much passion and heart in that went bad. That he, can you imagine being a part of a startup of a company and get run off of your company, run away off your company, and then you have an opportunity to come back, and see if you can fix it. It's a soap opera.
Yeah.
But he is adamant. He is.
But it's a damaged brand in a lot of ways. I mean,
no question.
I think everybody's was, no matter who runs it, no matter what direction they go in, so much has happened, and it feels like no one could really recreate the magic that it did have at one time.
Right.
I want to get your opinion because you know her well. Everybody has the worst perception of Dixie Carter as someone who runs a wrestling company, and I think it's so weird that the public perception's so bad when she really did so much to save it.
Yeah. She's one of my best friends, and I became real close with her through that time, still am today. She's a smart person, very bright, cares about people. She went above and beyond a lot of times that I know of to do things and take care of people in the company and all that. If there's a mistake she made, I feel like she just made some bad decisions on some people she brought in to the company. I mean, to me, that's
talent-wise or being management-wise?
Management-wise.
Okay.
Namely, Hogan and Bischoff. Not that they're bad people, but just the timing of when that happened, I don't feel like that was the right thing. And look, I didn't own the company, and I'm not a wrestling guru or anything like that. But it just felt like that the company was going for a Hail Mary at that time, and it just didn't work out. But so I think she made some decisions that, and I haven't asked her. I mean, she and I talk a lot, but we don't talk about wrestling anymore. I mean, I don't get her opinions about Global Force, or I don't get her opinions about, what Jeff is putting on TV, or we don't talk about that. We talk about family and racing and, the good old days. So I don't know if she'll say that, she made some mistakes, management mistakes or whatever. But I can tell you this, she's never, ever personally did anything intentional to hurt anybody. Everything that she did, every decision she made from the time she first came into the company, back when, Jeff was about 3 weeks away from being done. And she came in and saved the day. So for the whole time I've known her, I'm confident that she never purposely has tried to do anything to hurt anybody that was involved in that company. I think she had a lot of pride, and I think she always felt like that the next move that she's going to make is going to be the one that turns the corner. But I feel, wrestling fans they're tough. The hardcore, especially the online, experts, you might say, because somebody came in and maybe made some bad decisions that hurt a wrestling company, does that make her a bad person? And people have jumped through a lot of hoops to get to some of these.
But the perception is that she's tried to please that online audience, whereas someone like Jeff honestly doesn't care as much.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's some truth to that. And it's experience. It's not experience in running a business. She's a very, very talented, bright person that motivates people. If I had a huge company, I needed somebody to run it, probably couldn't afford her, but I would have no hesitation to put her in a position to run a company.
That says a lot.
But she didn't necessarily understand the wrestling business. It can be ruthless, as you well know, and I was exposed to some. It's a cutthroat business, and it's a small circle too. You think about WWE, Global Force, Ring of Honor, independent shows all over the country. This circle of wrestling is very, very small, and you cross paths with the same people off and on through different things. And I just don't think she fully understood the lengths at which people will go through sometimes to, move forward with their own agenda. And I just think she kept trying. She kept going to bat. I think the last thing she ever wanted to do was to have to walk away from that company. She came in knowing nothing about it. But she, some like people ask me all the time, why are you friends with all these wrestlers? And I can't explain it to people, but this fraternity of people kind of draws you in. I mean, I got some friends in this industry that have done some of the most bonehead things to me and around me and different things, and I should have never spoke to them again. But they're so, it's just I don't know how to explain it. The fraternity is such a strong fraternity of people, and but I just don't think she was prepared for, some of the people that she was encountering. I don't think she ever made a decision, obviously knowing that it was going to be a bad one. I just think she had some of the wrong people making decisions for her at a time when the company could no longer afford mistakes.
Right. And
that's what concerns me now. Since it's been rebranded to Global Force and Jeff's in a transition, they're trying to, and people already know I'm friends with Jeff, and so I'm going to try to help him when I can, but he's got a terrible mess to clean up. Because, when Jeff first came back in, he was trying to clean up all the mess from before. And there was so many people going into Bound for Glory last year. I mean, there were some talents that were owed big-time money. And Jeff saw that all these people got paid. To my knowledge, everybody, the ones that I've talked to, like the Jeff Hardys, I know of a time when he was owed a little bit of money and they paid. Jeff saw to it that all these people got paid. So now he's turning the leaf. So it's now Global Force Wrestling doing a rebrand. You mentioned a damaged brand, Impact. That's why he's trying to cut loose of that. So you take the assets and the positives, you try to get rid of the negatives, and you're basically starting from scratch. So what Jeff's got to do is take this company, rebuild it, or continue to build on it. And by the way, you've also got to do it within a budget. You've got, the people with Anthem have said, okay, this is our budget to run this company and to run these tapings. Do it. So he's got to make some unpopular decisions. He's had to let go of some people that were higher paid people, and bring, so people always say, Jeff's a bad guy. He got rid of this guy, and this guy. I'm like, okay, but what if you're on the other side of the table and you're the guy that has to make these decisions because you got to come in at this budget? And then people say, well, he's just bringing his people in to support him. I'm like, wouldn't you? If you're put in that spot, if you see how some of these people react after they've been fired, so now their true colors and their true feelings about Jeff are coming out. Do you think Jeff wants these people having his back at Global Force? I don't think so. So why wouldn't he want the people that he knows he can trust behind him? I think everybody does that. Mm-hmm. You're charged with, rebranding and rebuilding a company, and don't you want the people in your corner that you can trust? You don't want somebody that you're scared that's going to stab you in the back. So, but the people that got shuffled out, they're like, Jeff is this, Jeff is that, he's a bad guy and whatever. But the bottom line is, if this company in the next 12 to 18 months is not operating in the black, it's not going to be there for anybody. So a lot of people take things personally, but it's, what are these same people going to say about Jeff if he doesn't make some of these decisions and the company's upside down again? What do you? So
do you think that's even possible? Given I always just look at what they're doing now, and I almost think it's like a Mission Impossible. I know they have a smaller budget, but it's still relatively a pretty big budget. I mean, is it even possible with being in the shadows of WWE to make Global Force a success in the way that it would have to be a success for it to continue?
Yes.
You do.
I do believe that there's a market and a niche for a company like Global Force Wrestling, who understands what they are, who they are, live within your means, build talent from within, and build that fan base, hundreds at a time.
So just a couple of weeks ago, they attempted to do some live shows in the Northeast, and the crowds were not very good. I mean, do you think they're a brand that should stay out of the live show business?
I think you need to be in the live show business eventually to complete your brand. You have to get out and go to the people in these areas. You have to get out and take your stars to live shows in front of the people that you want to watch your TV show during the week. Do I think they should do it like right now? I'm not as convinced of that, but I think eventually, and it goes back to operating a company in the black, you have to make sure you're set up. Jeff needs time. Now, I don't care whether you're a friend or a fan of Jeff or not, or agree with his business principles or not. If you're a fan of wrestling, and if you want Global Force Wrestling to have a chance to succeed, the biggest thing that they need is patience and time from the higher-ups at Anthem and the people that are putting the money into the show. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 6 months. Probably not going to happen in a year. But Jeff's got to position himself in the company so that he can continue to put a good product or an improving product on TV, but also get out and have some live events and have enough, your company be strong enough to be able to withstand some lumps, because you're going to take some lumps. Mm-hmm. All of WWE shows are not, house shows are not home runs, but nobody says anything about it, or nobody cares, because they just consume it all up in the big scheme of things. And WWE has, they go to a major arena and have 4,500 people. Is that a successful house show night for them?
Probably
no,
not.
But they don't. Nobody talks about it. Nobody posts pictures of it online because
that's not true.
Nobody cares.
That's not true.
In the big scheme of things,
right.
Nobody cares. Vince surely doesn't care.
Right.
Because in the big scheme of things, they are set up and they can ride the waves a little bit.
Right.
And so I'm a firm believer in, especially in a case of Global Force Wrestling, you have to get out and have live events to take the product to the fans. I think personally, and they didn't ask me, but if they asked me, I would wait and do it when the people that are going to be the stars of Global Force Wrestling are more established as stars of Global Force Wrestling and not quote unquote indie stars. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, they got a lot of talented people like Sanjay Dutt and these people that I love to watch entertain, but they need for some of these people to be more established on TV as stars of Global Force Wrestling and represent them as stars of Global Force Wrestling at their live events. It just comes across to some people now that Global Force Wrestling is really just a glorified indie show, and because they've got so many people that they may have seen 2 weeks before on an indie show somewhere in the next town. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see them create more of their stars through their avenue on TV first for a while, get more people to buy into who they are, what they are, who their people are, who their stories are, their girls, their baby faces. I mean, a lot of people now when they go to a show probably don't even know who the baby face is and who the heel is, because they don't they don't have that recognition. So I think they have to get there, but I'm not 100% sure that they're ready to do that right now. But it is certainly an integral part of building a brand and getting people to, maybe if you go, I look at it like this, back when I was doing shows for TNA, if I only had 300 people, if we could somehow get 100 of those 300 to watch TNA the following week, then that was a plus. Mm-hmm. If we could build them that little bit at a time. And I think that Global Force has to do a similar thing. They have to build them, their audience a little bit at the time, and be in a position to absorb a flop there and again, because that's going to happen to everybody.
Okay. Well, Hermie, thank you so much for. I know you do tons of interviews with racing, but I was just.
No, I appreciate the time, man.
Privileged to be able to talk about wrestling.
Yeah.
I wish I could talk to you about racing the way you could talk to us about wrestling, but
so I can ask you a couple of racing questions.
I'd fail them all.
Yeah.
But
I tell you, I've been, a lot of ups and downs, and we discussed a lot of them today. I've learned a lot. Working in the wrestling business has taught me a lot. You learn a lot about people and how to run a business, and loyalty and different things like that. So the lessons I've learned through the good times and the bad times have really benefited me as I've continued to. And I try to be very diverse, with what I do. I've got anything from convenience stores to restaurants to finance companies I try to be diverse because I never know what's going to be hot and cold. But a lot of the lessons that I learned in the wrestling business have helped me prepare for that. So it's nice to be able to come back after all these years and talk to. And I want to thank. Never really had a chance to do this. I want to thank all the people, the wrestling fans that are watching this, that came out and supported our TNA live events back in those days. UWF. Not a week goes by that I don't get a tweet or something from somebody asking me about UWF coming back or whatever. We had a tremendous amount of fan support, and so I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you that ever bought a ticket, came to a show, passed out a flyer, did whatever to help us have those shows. We had a lot of fun.
And I want to thank Hermie because, 10 years ago my business is very different than it is now. Yeah. It was very different than it was there, but it fit with what we were doing at the time, and I learned a lot from a guy who really wasn't in the wrestling business that much. It was just I felt it was a hobby of yours at the time.
Yeah, I turned a lot of heads, in some ways for the wrong things by my different approach. I had a different approach to things, but when it's all said and done, I learned a lot, made a lot of great friends, including you, and continue to use those lessons learned today. So it's been fun to reconnect with everybody, and hope some people find this interview enlightening in some way.
Well, I think they will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Yes, sir.